Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Pro Football Focus, Mike, had this number. If the Saints beat the Falcons, their odds of making the playoffs, 80%. If they lose to the Falcons, the number drops to 44%. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. I could see a computer coming up with that generation, but we know from watching the Saints that it doesn't matter who they play. I mean, that is true because they have one of the easiest schedules that I ever remember covering in all my years of doing this. I mean, the NFL is bad in general this year, and it's really bad around the NFC South and the AFC South, who they also played, and the NFC in general. So, yeah, they if they can beat Atlanta and take a 2-game lead in this division and only face like one more team with a winning record the whole rest of the way, then yeah, the odds are very much in their favor. They're more in their favor than they are for Atlanta or Tampa Bay. But, you know, we cover this team in more of a, you know, not who are the Saints playing this week. It's what Saints are going to show up this week. And I think they could probably stumble into a 9-8 record without getting any better. But I still want to see the better version of this Saints team earn their way into the playoffs.
Mike, let's talk a little bit about Marshon, Lattimore, and Michael Thomas, their absence, what that means specifically this week in this matchup against Atlanta.
Well, obviously it hurts. Marshon Lattimore in particular. I mean, look, last year we saw this defense hold together pretty well, even though we missed 9 games in the middle of the season. I like their secondary depth better than I like their depth at any other position, but I think he might be the best player on the team. So you're really sugarcoating. Can they survive against quarterbacks like Desmond Ritter and offenses like Atlanta? Absolutely. Detroit will be much tougher the next week. I do like, obviously, how Paulson Adebo's playing this year. I do think Alante Taylor on the outside or moving into the slot and nickel, and Isaac Yiadom coming in and playing on the outside. I mean, those are guys that can hold up, but yeah, I'm not going to pretend like it's not a huge blow to lose Marshon Lattimore. And then the same with Michael Thomas. They haven't been getting nearly enough out of Michael Thomas this year, but that's one of the things that I would have listed as a top priority. It just becomes that much harder when you don't have that potential go-to guy who should be catching the ball on third downs. Now I don't know exactly who your go-to guy should be on third down.
One thing is for sure, Derek Carr clears the protocol, so he'll be a go on Sunday. Obviously, Derek Carr's, well, let me not say obviously. Do you still feel Derek Carr? Or do you feel Derek Carr gives the Saints the best chance to win Sunday in Atlanta?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think for Jameis Winston or even Taysom Hill to be the answer to that question, I would want the offense dedicated to those guys. I would want them named the starter in April and building the game plan around them and working with the receivers all the way through. So if you want to make an argument for Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill, I don't think the argument is just throw them in there. But we still need to see it with Derek Carr. We need to see evidence of why we think he's supposed to be the guy over those other two and why the Saints picked him and paid him so much more than those other two. And I don't know if a bye week is enough time for self-scouting and evaluation and figuring out, you know, what positives you can accentuate. You know, Derek Carr seems pretty optimistic that he thought the last 5 weeks were encouraging to him compared to the first 5 weeks. Hopefully the third 5 weeks or the third 7 weeks is by far the best yet, though.
On the other side, under center, it's Desmond Ritter, who's going to be back in as a starter. This will be the first time, obviously, the Saints have lined up against the Falcons this year and against Ritter. He was 2-2 late in the year last year when he got his opportunity. Do you have any sense, Mike, of how the Saints may fare against Desmond Ritter, and specifically because of how much this team this year has struggled to pressure the quarterback?
Yeah, well, look, I've never had a more obvious game plan read in my, you know, in talking about what you have to do to win a game than this one. It is the all-time ultimate. You have to stop the run against a team that is scary running the ball in Atlanta. I think they could be really good at it. They're stubborn with it. They're going to do it 30 times in this game. Bijan Robinson feels like a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, and they finally gave him 22 carries before the bye. They've been holding him back all year, but he had a quote during their bye week. They also just had a bye week saying, that's great that they preserved me for an 18-game season, but now we got to do whatever it takes to win. I just think it is going to be the Bijan Robinson show, and if they stop him for the entire first half, they're going to have to stop him again in the second half. Atlanta does not want this game in Desmond Ritter's hands. Atlanta never wants it to be 3rd and 7 or longer. They want Desmond Ritter to not matter in this game. So the Saints are going to have to stop the run. And if they can do that, then, they can tee off on Desmond Ritter and maybe get some of those sacks and maybe force some interceptions. But they're going to have to stop the run repeatedly to ever, have Desmond Ritter even be in a vulnerable position in this game.
Yeah, Mike's right. The 22 carries, that obviously was a career high, but the 22 for just 95 yards. So I don't know how you feel about it, Mike, but if the Saints, if Bijan Robinson gets 22 carries and you keep him under 100 yards, I would look at that as a win.
That's what you got to do. And look, Atlanta lost that game. So, but that's a secret. And look, we saw this against. Something I've been asking guys about and writing about a little bit this week is we don't actually have a great feel for how good the Saints' run defense is against running backs this year. We know they've had this horrible problem with leaky yardage to quarterbacks who are running the ball. But Indianapolis is the best example I can come up with. They had Jonathan Taylor back. They had Zach Moss. And they did a good job for the most part against that team, but they gave up a couple of 40-yard runs. And that's just what you can't do to Atlanta. You can't give Atlanta that 50-yard run where he finally breaks free and you get a one-play scoring drive. You're already in field goal position. They're going to have to be on their toes the entire game against this guy. And, the big story in Atlanta has been underusing him, and why aren't you using him more, and why hasn't he made a bigger impact? But he's the one guy that can win this game for Atlanta, and Atlanta's going to give him, 20-plus attempts probably to have that explosive play.
Mike Triplett's with us on Twitter at Mike Triplett, neworleans.football. Of course, our chats every week are brought to you by Benny's Car Wash. Benny's got a great Cyber Monday sale, as you might imagine. Get to bennyscarwash.com, bennyscarwash.com. Another angle here, Mike, of course, is the familiarity. Ryan Nielsen's there, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, Kentavious Street. Do you think that plays into any either side one way or another?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think that's an advantage that goes both ways. So I think it plays into the game for sure, but I don't know that it gives one side an advantage over the other. And I'm not all that wowed by Atlanta's defense. I mean, I think the bigger additions they made this offseason were probably Jesse Bates at safety. Calais Campbell's a little older version of who used to be a great player, Bud Dupree at linebacker. So they added a lot of talent to that defense, but I still think they're kind of a middle-of-the-pack defense. And I don't think that should be a preventative for New Orleans. And it's funny, I was joking today on our show. You could say Atlanta knows the Saints very familiar. I'm sure a lot of those guys know their offensive linemen really well, but I don't even think the Saints know their own offensive identity or what their bread and butter is and what their go-to plays are. So I don't know how Atlanta can do them.
No, there's a lot of legitimacy there. Last year, Mike, we also saw the Saints coming off the bye rip off a 3-game winning streak. Did they do anything last year that you could draw a parallel to give me reason for optimism that they might be able to get hot this year coming off the bye?
I think the bye is a little coincidental.
Okay.
But, I mean, look, I think the best thing you could say that Dennis Allen has done in his 2 years as head coach was what he did with his defense last year, and how they were off to a bad start, and how and then they lost Marshon Lattimore, and he kind of stayed the course and believed in the core principles of their defense and stuck with it. And, the players remained confident that he could do that. And then down the stretch last year, they played some of their best defensive football, certainly late in the year against Cleveland in that Ice Bowl game, at Philadelphia when they got Space Gardner Minshew. San Francisco even gave them a chance to win. I mean, they were just playing such great defense down the stretch. I hope he can do that same thing with his defense this year because, look, we don't know that they can find their offense at any point, but they better find their defense because that's what has to be special on this team. And been really disturbing how loose it's gotten on defense the last 5 weeks.
Mike Triplett is with us. Hey, before you go, I know you and I don't talk point spreads a bunch or anything like that, but the game opened with Atlanta as a 1-point favorite. It shifted to the Saints now, a slight 2-point favorite. Are you in any way surprised that it's that? I get it's the NFL and everybody's professionals, but Atlanta with Desmond Ritter, as much as they struggle, it would feel like this is a game where New Orleans should be a fairly obvious choice. No, yes, no?
Yeah, I guess maybe when it opened, there was the Derek Carr, Marshon, Lattimore, Michael Thomas triple whammy of injuries. Three of probably you could almost argue the three most important players on the team, but certainly three of the top 5 most important players on the team. So maybe that affected the opening line. Saints by 2 feels kind of right. They have one more win, and they were supposed to be the better team to start with. But, in my mind, I would consider it a pick 'em. My feeling on whether or not I think this is one the Saints should win feels completely 50-50 to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's saying these Saints should win a game. That completely feels arbitrary at this point.
If you're a gambler who's been watching the Saints this year, I don't think you can give them 3 points against anybody. Somebody will say, "Yeah, I like them to cover the 3." I mean, you can if you're in a pick 'em pool and you're like, "Ooh, who am I picking this week? New Orleans or Atlanta?" I'll probably pick New Orleans, but New Orleans plus more than a point against anybody, you never know what team's going to show up.
Yeah, and Falcons, of course, have Young Wei Koo, who's one of the most clutch kickers in the league. So if it comes down to a kick, the advantage clearly shifts to Atlanta at home. Mike Triplett, neworleans.football. He's on Twitter at Mike Triplett, and our chats every week are brought to you by Benny's Car Wash. Hey, man, belated happy Thanksgiving. Thanks again for jumping aboard with us here this Friday.
You, of course.
All right, man.
Thanks for having me, and happy Thanksgiving to you, too.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.